please hit that subscribe button. Hey everybody, better suited to win the Stanley Cup this season. If you are new to the channel, Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins.
Slapped out and he scored! And we're live. Hey everybody. So today I want to talk about the New York Islanders, who are slumping at the absolute worst time of the season, right here at the end of the year in the final month as we head in towards the playoffs and into April. It's been a real rough go here recently for the New York Islanders, and I can only imagine how frustrated their fans are right now, because this is a team that has been in playoff position pretty much the entire year. This is a team that, going back 2 months ago, even a month ago, if you had said a month ago that you thought the Islanders were going to miss the playoffs, you would have gotten absolutely shredded in the comment section. Absolutely torn apart. People would be calling you a clown, an idiot, you know nothing about hockey. Yet here we are on March 6th, and the Islanders have dropped down to the second wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. They're only 2 points in the playoffs, with the New York Rangers right behind them, and the Carolina Hurricanes only 1 point behind the Rangers, 3 points behind the Islanders, and the Isles are in very real trouble here. Very real potential to not make the playoffs this season, particularly with how New York has been playing and how bad the Islanders have been playing. It goes to show you that things in the NHL can change like that. And things have really, really changed quickly here for the New York Islanders. They were solidly up there with Washington and Pittsburgh and at the top of the Metro Division, and they looked like they were easily a playoff team for 90% of this season. For 90% of this season, there was no questions asked. The New York Islanders were a playoff team, absolutely. And now, here we are in March, and they are clinging on for dear life right here. 2-6-2 in their last 10 games. They've lost 3 in a row now, and they've fallen from a divisional spot down to the last wild card spot in the East, and like I said, only have a 2-point cushion in the wild card. And they've got multiple teams right on their doorstep trying to take that spot away from them. So this has been a rough patch for the New York Islanders, and it is coming at the absolute worst time of year, right near the end of the season, when you want to be playing your best hockey and gearing up for a playoff run, not just trying to cling to a playoff spot. Now, we do still have about a month left in the season, so there's obviously time here for the Islanders to turn this around. And, next week we might be talking about a completely different story as the Islanders win 3 or 4 straight, pull themselves right back into, easily into playoff position, and everything's fine again. That could happen. But right now, it is not looking good for the New York Islanders. Now, in my 3 reasons why video for them, I did say I think the Islanders make the playoffs this year, and I'm sticking with that. I do think the Islanders are a playoff team. They should be a playoff team. They're good enough to be a playoff team, but they're going to have to win some big games down the stretch here if they want to make the postseason, because they are not making it easy on themselves. Let's go and look at some of their past few weeks here and just see how things are going. So we go back to the middle of February. The Islanders beat the Capitals and Flyers on back-to-back nights by a score of 5-3. And at that point, the Islanders were in very, very good position playoff-wise, and they were playing well. They had won 4 of their last 5 games, and things really were looking good. And the Islanders were set. They were in playoff position. Everything was okay, and there was nothing to worry about. Then they go on a Western Conference road trip and lose all 4 games. They get shut out by Nashville 5-0. They get shut out by Vegas 1-0. They lose to Arizona 2-1, and they lose to Colorado 3-1 on that February road trip. 0 points, not even a single OT loss to get a point out of it. 0 points on that 4-game road trip. Only 2 goals scored the entire road trip in 4 games. 2 goals, 0 points, 4 straight L's for the Islanders. And that really is when things turned. That's when the Islanders' season changed. And all of a sudden, they had lost 4 straight. And, that's obviously a lot of games with no points, and teams are starting to get closer and closer and starting to catch them. Also, goal scoring was obviously a huge issue, so that's when we start getting close to the trade deadline where they're going to be looking to make a move for a scorer. They come back home from that road trip and they get 2 big wins on home ice that they desperately needed. They beat the Detroit Red Wings 4-1 and the San Jose Sharks 4-1. Now, they should be beating the Red Wings and the Sharks, especially if they're a playoff team, and those two are 2 of the worst teams in the entire NHL. They should be winning those games, but they do. They get the job done on home ice, and they pick up a big 4 points there. Then we have trade deadline day on February 24th. They go out and they get J.G. Pageau. And that's a big move for them and a big addition, because that's giving them some significant increase in offense that they desperately needed and hadn't had. And now that they go out and they make a major move, fully expecting to be a playoff team, fully expecting to be not just in the playoffs, but trying to make a deep run into the playoffs. They lose their next game in overtime to the New York Rangers 4-3. OT game, close game, nothing wrong there. They get a point out of it. They lose to St. Louis in overtime on the road. Their next game, okay, they get a point out of it. St. Louis is the best team in the West. It happens. Those aren't big problems. Then they get blown out on home ice by the Boston Bruins on the last day of February. And you can say that, yeah, Boston's the best team in the league, and that would have been a tough game for the Islanders to win. Sure, you're right, but getting blown out at home 4-0, not even scoring a goal on home ice. That is not a good look for a team that wants to be competitive against teams like the Bruins in the Eastern Conference and be one of those top tier teams in the East. And that was not a great loss for the Islanders, but it happens, and Boston's really, really good. We know that. Then we move on to the last 2 games. Tuesday night, 6-2 loss at home to the Montreal Canadiens, who aren't even close to a playoff spot. The Montreal Canadiens, they get blown out at home by the Canadiens. And then last night, in a brutal loss to the Ottawa Senators, who are one of the 3 worst teams in the entire NHL. And they lose 4-3 to Ottawa last night. And you cannot be losing games like that when you're in a playoff race like this. These standings have really closed up on the Islanders. They are not safe anymore. They do not have a cushion, and they are losing games to significantly worse opponents like the Canadiens and Senators. And you have to be winning those games. If the Islanders would just take care of business against the teams that they should be beating, they'd only have to go out and win a couple of these tough games that they have coming up. And we're going to look at their schedule going forward, which is very, very difficult for the Islanders. A very difficult schedule down the stretch here. They would only have to win a few of these difficult games and still be able to get into the playoffs if they would just take care of business against the teams that they're supposed to win against. But they're losing to the Canadiens, they're losing to the Senators, and now they're putting themselves in a position where they need to win a majority of these difficult games coming up. And that is going to be a tough thing to do for the New York Islanders. Let's look at their schedule ahead here. Tomorrow, they have the Carolina Hurricanes at home. This is a difficult game. Carolina, who has not been playing well recently either, is directly in competition with the Islanders for this wild card spot. 3 points behind them with a game in hand. Direct competition for that wild card spot. The Islanders need to win this game tomorrow. Whether it's regulation, whether it's overtime, whatever, shootout, whatever, they need to come out of this game against Carolina with 2 points tomorrow because that is at home. They have got to win that game. Then they go on a 4-game road trip. They go to Western Canada for Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. Not an easy trip at all there for any Eastern Conference team to go out to Western Canada and make that trip. But particularly a slumping team like the Islanders, who are not particularly good on the road. They're much better on home ice than they are on the road. This is a tough road trip for them against 3 teams that are currently in playoff position in the Western Conference. So not slouches of opponents either. Then they have a game at Pittsburgh on Sunday the 15th. Very, very difficult game there against a team that's ahead of you in the standings. They finally come back home. They have one off home game against Calgary. They have to play again. They have Calgary twice in the next 2 weeks. I know they're not in the same conference, but that's another very desperate team. Those are going to be tough games because Calgary is a team that's fighting for their own playoff lives in the West and going to be very desperate for points. So those are 2 tough games. Then they go back on the road at Toronto, very difficult game there. At New Jersey, a very winnable game there, and a game that if the Islanders are going to make the playoffs, have to win. They have to win against New Jersey because that's not a team you can afford to lose to when you're in a tight playoff race like this. Then they come back home for another game against Carolina, another game that they need to win because the Hurricanes are in direct competition with them for this playoff spot. And then they go at Philadelphia, home versus Buffalo, at Montreal, at Columbus, two games there. That Columbus game going to be very, very difficult. Another team directly competing for a playoff spot with the New York Islanders, 1 point ahead of them right now. Montreal, they just lost to Montreal. That's a game that they need to win now. They need to go on the road at Montreal and win that game on March 28th. That's a team that they should be beating. Then they come back home for Minnesota, and they finish up the season at home with Chicago and then New Jersey, 2 games that they absolutely should win in April. So this is not an easy schedule the rest of the way. They have some very, very difficult games against Carolina, Pittsburgh, Toronto, Philadelphia, Columbus. They have a road trip to Western Canada at Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. That's a very difficult trip for the Eastern Conference teams to make. This is no guarantee, guys, that this team makes the playoffs. With that remaining schedule and how they've been playing, they are really slumping at the absolute worst time this season, and it is no guarantee that they make the postseason. So it's been a rough go here recently for the Islanders. Like I said, 2-6-2 in their last 10 games, and they have a very difficult schedule going forward. So they're going to have to pull out some big, big wins if they want to make the postseason this year, and they have to make sure that they win the games that they're supposed to win, which they have not been doing recently, losing to Ottawa, losing to Montreal. They can't afford any more of those type of losses, or they're going to get passed, whether it's by Carolina, whether it's by the Rangers, the other New York team. They're going to get passed if they continue to play this way. They have got to get it together. They've been a playoff team all year long. I would hate to see them lose it now, right at the end of the season, but they really are starting to slump at the absolute worst time. I'm sticking with my prediction, guys. I don't go back on predictions very often, if ever. I said that they're going to be a playoff team in the 3 Reasons Why video. I'm going to stick with that. I think the Islanders should make the playoffs this year. I think they will, but they are going to need to really pick it up here down the stretch, pick up some big wins, and make sure that even if it's only by a point or 2, they get in the playoffs, and they are a wild card team this year. I think it's going to be wild card at best for them. I don't see them getting past Philly or Pittsburgh now at this point with the way that those 2 teams are playing, particularly Philadelphia with 8 wins in a row. Pittsburgh, had that losing streak but have won a couple in a row now coming back from that. I think Pittsburgh's in pretty good shape now. It's going to be a wild card spot for New York if they do get in. So we'll see what happens here. It must be extremely frustrating to be an Islanders fan at this point, watching them, after being in a playoff spot this entire season, kind of start to choke it away here. Hopefully they can maintain a playoff spot, but we'll see what happens here the rest of the way. So with that, guys, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.